Welcome to the Pleiadian Star Tribe Talk Show. Today we're going into a deep dive. Our mission, as always, is really to cut through all the noise, the information overload, and give you the essential knowledge you need. And today, we're opening a door to an experience that is, well, it's perhaps one of the most challenging yet profoundly transformative parts of human consciousness. I'm your guide today, ready to help unpack the material, and I'm joined by our wonderful mystical analyst who brings such a deep, soulful understanding to this really complex topic.
Oh, it's truly an honor to be here navigating this particular terrain with you. And this deep dive feels so critical because, while this experience is pretty universal on the path, it's just so often deeply misunderstood. We're not just talking about some abstract concept today. We're really analyzing a process of, soul-shaping transformation. It touches mystics, seekers, even people who might never call themselves spiritual.
Absolutely. And the focus for this deep dive, we're calling it the dark night of the soul, transformation in the shadows. That phrase itself comes from the historical mystics, most notably St. John of the Cross. And the sources we're drawing on today, they're really quite broad, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. We're looking at everything from, those centuries-old theological texts, right, through to modern psychological research that touches on identity dissolution. And also, importantly, those really intimate personal reflections from seekers, people who've actually navigated this passage themselves.
Right. So our goal today is really to bring some clarity, some context, because when people find themselves in this dark night, the feeling is often, I'm being punished, or something's fundamentally broken in me.
Exactly. And we really need to extract the deepest wisdom our sources offer to help understand that this passage, it's actually not a spiritual failure at all. It's more like a necessary purification, a sacred kind of initiation, really. It's the crucial breakdown, the dissolution that has to happen before a deeper, more authentic light can truly emerge. It's like we're examining that unlit chamber of the heart, where this profound alchemy happens, turning fear into real wisdom.
Okay, so let's start right there with defining it. Lots of people experience deep sadness or profound doubt, maybe just difficulties in life. How do we actually distinguish this specific sacred passage, the dark night of the soul, from, say, typical depression, or maybe emotional burnout, or just hitting a really rough patch? What are those initial specific signs that might signal someone has entered this often unwarned spiritual passage?
That distinction is so, so important, and it's where the sources really give us crucial insight. The dark night, it's defined by a very specific kind of spiritual emptiness. It's different from situational unhappiness that might be rooted in, external things going wrong.
Okay, so not just feeling down because something happened.
Right. Clinically, depression often involves what they call anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. And it might be linked to measurable physiological things, chemical imbalances, maybe it responds to clinical treatment.
Yeah.
But the dark night, that's more like a spiritual atrophy. The person might still find some joy, maybe in family or work, but their spiritual practices, the things that used to work, they suddenly just fail them.
Ah, okay. So the key indicator is the spiritual toolkit kind of failing,
Yeah.
even if the rest of life seems relatively stable.
Exactly. That's the core of it. The source material talks about these seasons on the path of awakening that, nobody really warns you about. And the most telling sign is that the light you once trusted, that easy connection, the clear guidance you felt, that sense of divine presence always being there, it flickers. It starts to fade. The tools that used to anchor you, prayer, meditation, maybe certain rituals, even just being part of a spiritual community, they suddenly feel dull, mechanical, or just empty, meaningless. Your prayers feel like they're hitting a ceiling, unanswered. And even your guides, your mentors, they seem silent. It's really a crisis of faith, specifically linked to how you used to connect with the divine.
Wow, that feeling of your spiritual resources just drying up, that must be intensely disorienting, especially if you've spent years building that connection.
Oh, it's the ultimate disorientation. Utterly confusing. But here's the critical reframing, especially from those historical sources, like the ones referencing St. John of the Cross. They explicitly call these necessary passages. They're not punishment.
Passages, not punishments. That's key.
Absolutely. You're not actually lost. You're just entering this inner sanctum, this place of deep transformation. And this state, it's defined by its outcome. It's here in this dark, unlit space that every false light, every borrowed light, it just burns away. It's the ego's whole spiritual identity structure that's being, dismantled.
Okay, so thinking about the timeline then, the sources seem to suggest it often starts quite quietly. This dying of the old self, maybe happens before the big crisis really hits. What are those subtle entry points, those quiet signals we might look for, indicating the start of this spiritual dissolution?
You're right, the beginning is often almost invisible. Because the change is so internal, so pervasive, someone might just wake up one day feeling profoundly detached
Yeah.
from the vibrancy of life, you know? It's as if the world has suddenly lost its color. Things that used to bring deep, simple spiritual joy, like a walk in nature or reading something inspiring, now feel hollow, flat.
Mhm.
And crucially, your intuition, which maybe was once really sharp, bright, decisive, like, feels muted now, withdrawn, almost like a dead battery. It genuinely feels like the guiding aspect of spirit has just stepped back, leaving you alone in this vast, echoing silence.
And that silence, that's what creates the biggest fear, isn't it? That feeling of being abandoned. But the sources, they insist this silence is actually recalibration. Can you expand on that? Why is this withdrawal necessary for, deeper spiritual growth?
This is the genius of it, really, and also the hardship. The sources assure us the silence is not abandonment. It's a necessary recalibration, and it's rooted in spiritual maturation. Think of it less like punishment and more like, well, the universe kind of enforcing self-reliance.
Okay.
The soul or spirit intentionally withdraws that familiar warmth, that recognizable comfort, so that you, the traveler, must learn to find your own inner fire, your intrinsic light. If you're always relying on external validation or external warmth or those constant little divine breadcrumbs, you never actually learn how to generate that heat, that certainty, that faith from within.
Right. Stay dependent.
Exactly. This withdrawal, it enforces self-sufficiency. It demands this profound trust in your own inherent light, even when there's no external proof, no signs, no synchronicities.
That sounds like the ultimate lesson in generating your own spiritual authority rather than just relying on, well, spiritual dependency.
Precisely. And the underlying purpose of this whole exercise, it's profound purification. What some mystical traditions actually call nigredo, the blackening, the dissolution. Everything that is not truly you begins to crumble under this intense spiritual pressure.
What kinds of things?
We're talking about the masks you wore to get love or approval, the roles you played to feel worthy in your community, maybe even in your family, the belief systems that gave you a sense of safety, but maybe it was a false safety, a conditional one. All these structures, they just start to dissolve in the face of this uncompromising naked truth.
So it's like a spiritual demolition, but a very targeted one.
Highly targeted and ruthlessly effective, honestly. The dark night is a crucible specifically for the false self. And out of that purification comes the fundamental question this whole passage poses. It's the core demand that requires an answer from the traveler, stripping away everything external. Who are you without your armor?
Wow. And the armor being.
All those titles, achievement, the external supports, the roles you played, those rigid definitions that made up the old self.
Okay.
And as our sources definitely acknowledge, in those initial stages, facing that naked self, facing that question head on, it's acutely painful, overwhelming, potentially terrifying even.
And that initial quiet pain, it seems to escalate pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Leading us right into what you call the descent into shadow. So if the first stage is that quiet confusion, the tools failing, the second stage is characterized by this immense emotional weight, existential dread, a real depth of despair. And for the person going through it, the sources describe it as feeling. Well, endless.
It absolutely feels endless because your normal ways of understanding time or regulating emotions, they just seem to stop working. This phase is marked by this pervasive sense of heaviness, like a weight. Our sources describe days where tears just flow, but there's no discernible immediate reason. It's like the soul itself is weeping for the dissolution of the old self. And nights where your chest just aches with this invisible spiritual weight that no physical ailment can explain.
Mm-hmm.
And in this stage, the traveler questions everything. With this paralyzing intensity, their purpose in life, their fundamental faith, the goodness of the universe, and sometimes, really terrifyingly, they question their own sanity.
And it's never just about the present pain either, is it? We often hear that the dark night brings old wounds, things you thought were healed, roaring back to the surface. So for someone listening, trying to cope with the present struggle, why does the past, maybe childhood pain, ancestral grief, past traumas, why does it insist on resurfacing during this already devastating time?
This is probably the most misunderstood part of the whole process, and it really speaks to the deep intelligence behind the soul's timing. These old wounds, the accumulated pain, the grief you never fully processed, the trauma, they rise up from the depths not to torment you further.
Okay, that's important.
It's crucial. They rise specifically to be liberated through you, and they do it in this heightened state of awareness where the usual defenses are down. See, the ego, which previously suppressed or maybe compartmentalized this pain just to ensure survival, it's dissolving now. So the deep processing capacity of the soul is active. It's unobstructed by those old ego defenses.
So the Dark Night actually provides the psychological space, or maybe the spiritual space, for true deep-seated healing to finally happen.
Precisely. The Dark Night isn't here to teach you complicated new spiritual laws or concepts. It's actually here to unteach you.
Unteach.
Yeah, to unteach the deep illusions, the lies we believed about ourselves based on past conditioning, past hurts. It strips away all those layers of definition so you can remember the fundamental, unblemished self you were before the world or maybe trauma defined you. Healing, in this context, it's this organic remembering of who you truly are. And it's facilitated by clearing out all that ancestral and personal debris that's been blocking the view.
It really sounds like reframing suffering then, moving it from being this meaningless obstacle to something essential, sacred even, a necessary catalyst.
That is the sacred medicine. Our sources talk so beautifully about this alchemical shift. Your pain becomes sacred medicine when you can finally achieve radical acceptance. When you stop resisting its presence.
Because fighting it just makes it worse.
It perpetuates the suffering. Exactly. When you fight the pain, you're caught in the struggle. When you accept it as the process, the quality of the experience starts to change. And furthermore, the tears which feel so pointless and exhausting during this phase, they become what the mystics called holy water. They become holy water when you allow them to cleanse what your words just can't articulate or process. It's a purification that happens through feeling rather than, intellectual understanding or doing some ritual.
Okay, let's pivot then to maybe the most challenging emotional aspect of this stage. That profound sense of disconnection from spirit, from a higher power, the silence of spirit. If someone listening is genuinely losing their foundational faith and those spiritual breadcrumbs, the synchronicities, have just completely disappeared, what tangible, grounded advice do the sources offer? How do they stay anchored in the physical world?
That's such a practical and crucial question because that feeling of cosmic abandonment, it's utterly devastating. However, the silence of spirit, when you analyze it through deep psychological and theological lenses, it's really rooted in this transition. A transition from needing felt certainty to developing unconditional faith. Let's go back to that mother bird analogy we touched on. It's profound. She has to step back so the fledgling can learn to trust its own wings. Spirit does the same thing.
So the silence isn't really absence. It's more like an initiation into personal authority.
It's an invitation to maturity. When the divine voice quiets down, it's actually urging you to finally hear your own inner authority, which maybe got drowned out before by the noise of constant external guidance or prophecies or signs. When those familiar spiritual confirmations fade, the synchronicities stop, the easy answers aren't there anymore. The universe is asking for a massive leap. It asks you to trust without immediate proof.
Okay, but practically how? What does someone do day to day?
The practical advice from the sources for staying anchored during this time is, well, it's deceptively simple. Focus on small, tangible acts. Acts of service, maybe, or just basic self-care. Maintain simple, consistent routines. Cook a meal. Go for a walk outside. Feel your feet on the ground. Focus on physical tasks that require grounded presence. When the mind is in absolute chaos, the body has to become the anchor.
That makes a lot of sense. When the internal world feels like it's dissolving, focus on the external constants, the simple things. But what about that core sense of love? How do you maintain a belief in universal love when it feels completely distant, completely absent?
This leads to probably the most profound insight of the entire Dark Night experience. When universal love feels distant, it's not actually gone. It's reminding you to become the love that you're seeking.
Become the love.
Yes. The spiritual distance is often an illusion, and it's caused by the sheer scale of the intimacy you're actually moving into. The universe hasn't left you. It's standing so incredibly close, merging its energy field with yours, that you literally cannot see where you end and it begins.
Wow.
This process urges you, pushes you to move from being a passive receiver of love to actively embodying it, making that connection unassailable because now it's housed right within you.
Okay, let's talk more about the transformation itself then, this idea of alchemy in this specific context. We're kind of moving now from describing the devastating experience of the pain towards understanding the intentional process of being fundamentally changed by it. How do the sources define this intense personal alchemy that happens?
Well, alchemy, historically speaking, it's the art of transmutation, right? Turning base metal into gold. The Dark Night is your soul's most rigorous, most demanding version of that very process. It takes the raw, painful stuff, the shame, the self-doubt, the loss, the fear, and it uses the refining fire of the void to transmute it all into unshakable wisdom, into absolute clarity,
Hmm.
into intrinsic faith that doesn't need external proof anymore. It's like the ultimate recycling program for the soul, really. Taking what felt like worthless suffering and revealing its priceless value as foundational strength.
And for that transmutation, that change, to happen,
Yeah.
the sources seem very clear that something has to be completely broken down first. The ego seems to be the primary structure that just cannot survive this passage intact. Can you tell us more, maybe in detail, about this necessary destruction of the self? What does that dissolution actually look like in someone's day-to-day life?
Yes, the destruction is necessary because the old container, the ego, that whole collection of conditioned responses, definitions, boundaries, it's simply too small, too rigid. It can't hold the expansive, authentic light that's trying to emerge. We use the analogy of the caterpillar for good reason.
Right.
The caterpillar has to dissolve completely inside the chrysalis. It literally liquefies into this genetic soup before the new physical architecture of the butterfly can even begin to be built. So you are not falling apart. Even though every single fiber of your psychological and emotional being is screaming at you that you are.
It feels like falling apart.
It feels exactly like falling apart. But you are breaking open the old structure so that your true evolved form can finally be revealed.
That soup phase, as you called it. That sounds terrifying. What are the sort of day-to-day symptoms of that ego dissolution? How does it manifest?
It usually manifests as profound identity confusion. Just, who am I? People lose interest in their former hobbies, sometimes even their careers. They might find themselves inexplicably pulling away from friendships that used to be absolutely central to their identity. The values that once guided them suddenly feel hollow, empty. They experience this deep existential disorientation because, well, the ego is the structure that organizes our reality.
Right, it gives us our framework.
Exactly. So when it starts to dissolve, the world feels chaotic, unstructured, often quite meaningless for a time. But this inner chaos is actually necessary for the new divine architecture to take root within you.
So when someone is right in the middle of that identity dissolution, that chaos, the struggle feels like just unending, random punishment. It feels pointless. But you characterized this struggle earlier as an intentional shaping process. You mentioned hammer strikes. How should someone listening try to reframe that continuous psychological pressure they might be feeling?
That reframing is absolutely essential for survival, really. Every doubt that crashes through your mind, every single sleepless night spent wrestling with that feeling of void, every moment you feel despair and honestly think, I cannot possibly go on. These are not random acts of fate. They're not cosmic cruelty. These are the hammer strikes shaping the diamond of your spirit.
Pressure creating the diamond.
Exactly. Pressure creates density. Without the immense sustained heat and pressure of the dark night, the spirit can remain kind of soft, reactive, easily knocked off balance. The pressure creates ultimate spiritual density, resilience, and unshakable conviction. It guarantees that the light that eventually emerges is robust. It's capable of enduring the challenges that come with a truly awakened life.
That's a really powerful way to think about it. A moment of reflection and hope, maybe. So if the diamond is still being shaped, what grace, what beauty might be hidden in the breakdown itself, something that the traveler can maybe lean on, even if the end goal still seems miles and miles away?
We have to hold on to the faith, and it is faith at this point, that there is inherent beauty in the breakdown. Even when the experience feels ugly and chaotic and messy, there is grace hidden deep within the grief. It often manifests in unexpected ways, maybe profound moments of radical honesty with yourself, or sudden unexpected clarity about what truly matters now that the superficial stuff is falling away.
Little glimmers.
Little glimmers, exactly. And fundamentally, beneath all the pain, pure love is blooming. It's patiently waiting for acceptance. The deep work isn't about rushing through the refining fire. It's about surrendering to it, knowing, trusting that the suffering has a purpose far beyond the immediate discomfort. It's building capacity for light, for love, for wisdom.
And eventually,
Right.
if the traveler manages to navigate this surrender, the dark night does end. Can you describe that moment when the soft dawn finally arrives after all that sustained darkness? Is it like a sudden euphoric explosion of light like maybe people expect from a big spiritual awakening?
Generally, no. It's usually not like that. It's described as coming softly, subtly, almost sneaking up on the traveler. It's rarely that blinding, euphoric, almost manic light that sometimes characterizes an initial spiritual awakening, the kind that often actually precedes the dark night.
Okay.
This new light, the light that dawns after the dark night, it's gentler, it's slower, it's wiser, and it's fundamentally truer because it's been tested. Tested under immense pressure. It's an embodied light. It's integrated into your very bones, your sinews. It's not just some borrowed or fleeting ephemeral glow. It's yours.
And what shifts then in the traveler's day-to-day perception of the world after the soft dawn arrives? How do they know they're really, out of the woods?
Well, the senses often sharpen, but with a new kind of quiet appreciation. The constant noise of the ego searching, its judging, its needing, that has quieted down.
Yeah.
And that allows this deep resonance to return. The air might feel clearer, sharper on your skin. Music sounds richer, sweeter, because you can feel the emotional depth without all the mental noise, the constant self-analysis.
Yep.
You start to see the sacredness in ordinary things. Things you probably overlooked before when you were busy chasing grand spiritual milestones. Like just the way sunlight falls through the leaves on a tree, the texture of a rock in your hand, or simply noticing the rhythmic way your own breath rises and falls and recognizing it as this quiet, constant prayer. It's like a return to simplicity, but it's a simplicity that's now charged with profound meaning.
This really speaks to that fundamental shift in consciousness we touched on earlier, that move from always searching for the divine out there somewhere to actually embodying it within.
Exactly that. Post-dark night, you're no longer chasing enlightenment like it's some external goal, some finish line you have to cross. You embody it in your daily actions, in your way of being. You no longer feel compelled to search for the divine in the heavens or on retreats or in gurus because you feel it, pulsing quietly, intimately, unshakably right there in your own chest. The whole external search just collapses because the profound realization hits you. You are the temple. You are inseparable from the divine source, and that realization is complete. It's irreversible.
Okay, so now we move into this final crucial phase, integration. The dark night is over, the light has returned, gentler now. What is the state of being like after this whole intense process is successfully integrated? What does this new architecture of the self look like in practical terms for someone listening?
Yeah, emergence is definitely not about going back to the person you were before this initiation started. That self is gone. Honestly, they couldn't have survived the purification. Integration is all about remembering and then stabilizing the divine architecture of who you are becoming.
Becoming, not returning.
Exactly. The foundation of this new self is built on the very bones of what dissolved. It is the practical wisdom you gain from navigating the void. You're standing in this core strength now, a strength that was forged under immense, sustained pressure. And that fundamentally changes how you engage with practical, everyday life.
How does that integrated wisdom practically change things?
Right.
Like how someone interacts with the world, for instance, what might change in their relationships or maybe their career decisions or even just how they react to stress.
The change is often subtle from the outside, but it feels revolutionary from the inside. Because the ego's desperate need for control has been dramatically reduced, the integrated soul reacts less and observes more. There's more space. In relationships, this often manifests as less projection. You're not projecting your old wounds onto your current partner as much. There's a higher capacity for unconditional love simply because you no longer rely on others to validate your worth. You found that within.
That's huge.
It is. And in career, the drive often shifts. It moves away from purely external achievement and validation titles, money, status, towards intrinsic meaning, towards genuine service, what actually feels purposeful in stressful situations. They no longer cause that complete identity collapse they might have before. Instead, they're met with this quiet resilience. A resilience rooted in the experiential knowledge that you survived the worst inner storm imaginable, and you came through.
And this whole journey must prepare the traveler for a profoundly new way of seeing the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially how they view pain and darkness itself. You mentioned the eyes of compassion earlier.
It absolutely does. When you emerge, you realize, not just intellectually, but you know it in your bones, that darkness was never the enemy you feared it was. It was the womb of creation, the necessary void, the fertile ground from which all true, lasting form and all new beginnings have to spring. You understand deep down that your own suffering carved a deeper vessel within you, and that vessel is now ready for a much more vast, unconditional love to fill it. Your integrated light, it shines brighter now precisely because of the shadows it has known, the shadows it traveled through and ultimately integrated. The contrast gives the light its depth, its richness.
And that depth must translate almost immediately into genuine compassion for others who are struggling.
Absolutely, instantly. The ability to recognize another soul who's lost in their own dark night, whether it's showing up as quiet despair, maybe addiction, or just this fragile kind of bravery, it becomes immediate. You recognize the look in their eyes, you know the weight they feel in their chest. Because you have walked that same path, stripped bare, you understand how sacred and how necessary their pain truly is. And you'd never try to dismiss it or fix it or diminish it. You simply recognize it. You honor the immense courage it takes just to stand in that refining fire.
This really is the ultimate spiritual paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
That by being stripped of absolutely everything external, we end up gaining the most profound, unassailable inner strength.
It is the most intimate, the most profound dance you will ever share with your own soul. The entire journey through the dark night, it's designed systematically to strip you of everything external. All the titles, the achievements, the securities, the perceived comforts for one single fundamental reason, so that you may finally, irrevocably, touch the eternal, the unchangeable, the unconditional essence within you, that foundational connection. That is the lasting, practical wisdom of the shadow. Hashtag outro.
Wow. That journey, from that silent confusion and profound dissolution all the way to this luminous integrated embodiment, it really provides such essential context for anyone navigating deep transformation. So to summarize our main finding for you, our listener, the dark night is a necessary purifying dissolution. It breaks down the false conditioned self, but it leads directly to authentic, unshakable self-discovery.
Oh.
And, importantly, a dramatically increased capacity for unconditional love and service in the world.
And if you happen to be in that intensely difficult space right now, please remember this wisdom. It's drawn from centuries of seekers, and it offers ultimate hope, ultimate reassurance. You are not broken. You are being rewritten by light too vast to comprehend. The dark night is not your ending. It is your sacred chrysalis. Hold tight, surrender to the process as best you can, and allow yourself to be remade from the inside out.
This whole conversation really urges us to integrate the profound, often difficult wisdom that we gain during our toughest moments. So as you reflect on this journey of purification, we want to leave you with one final thought to consider this week, something drawing directly from that integrated wisdom.
What wisdom has your pain taught you that joy never could?
Ponder that question deeply this week. And remember that even in the physical universe, the most radiant stars are born from immense pressure and sustained darkness. And so is the deepest part of you. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the shadows of transformation. Until next time, travel gently.